Hey, welcome to Framework. I am Al Schwartz. Joining me once again is Chris Prentice. Say hi, Chris.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I'm good. We're here to talk about The Sopranos once more. We're up to season 5. I understand this is your favorite season.
Absolutely. This is to me. I'm not gonna say it's not close. It is close. There's other seasons that are close to it. I just you know me. I'm a fan of the character actor, and they just brought in a murderer's row of character actors this season, and so and they used them all very
Yeah.
well too. So that's I think what really makes this one my favorite. I mean, obviously the storylines are as good as ever, but I just love the addition of all the new characters, and that is why it's my favorite.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely my favorite so far. I'm holding off because that final run,
Oh
I
yeah,
remember being so strong that it might end up eclipsing it. Um, but up to this point, it's neck and neck between season 2 and this for me as the best. Um, and a big
yeah,
part
like
of that is what you were saying, that the character actors bringing in Buscemi was
oh yeah,
like threatened to be a thing of, oh, this is the sort of gimmicky one. He's a little more, I mean, he's sort of the prototypical character actor, uh,
yeah.
except that he's so much so that he's transcended that, and that now like we know his name, and you can refer to Buscemi instead of Mr.
Yes,
Pink
he's
or
he's he's the
whoever.
rare, universally known character actor at this
Yeah.
point because he's just been so good at it for so long that now people see him and he's just so wrecking. Nobody really looks like him except his brother in a few movies. But aside from that, you see him and he's like, oh, Steve Buscemi, yeah. But I mean, yeah, there's him. I mean, there's Frank Vincent, Robert Loggia, even Frankie Valli. I like, and then it's like so they give you all these great character actors to come in as the new mobsters who just come out of prison, and then they're like, "Oh, hey, by the way, we're going to throw in David Strathairn as the school counselor, so enjoy that too." So, I mean, it's like, whoa! I mean, a season that I just kind of gush over because I just have so much fun seeing these new characters in this world and how they interplay with all the established characters that we already love at this point.
Yeah, what I was going to say about Buscemi was that it was the one time when it threatened to be like, oh, here's like a movie star sort of like intruding into Soprano world, which is, that people were recognizable in some ways, but largely eschewed having like big time stars on it. It seemed like its own little world.
Yeah.
Um, and there's so much authenticity to the gangster and the New Jersey like casting of people.
Sure.
Um,
Well,
maybe
they
some overlap with the Scorsese universe, I suppose. That there's a lot of recasting from Goodfellas,
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a show. I mean, if Frank Vincent wasn't going to end up on this show, then it's like why? It's almost like why do it? I mean, it's like at some point he had to be part of this. But in terms of Buscemi,
surprising it took this long.
oh, I know it is. It is very surprising. But in terms of Buscemi, I think it was also great that he came in, and obviously there's a lot of conflict between Tony B and Tony, but he's not the villain. He's not.
Right.
He makes life very hard for Tony, and he does a lot of things that ultimately do him in. But he's not brought in as the season's new villain. It's like you like him, you want him to kind of make the right decisions and not end up in the predicament that he ends up in. So the fact that he's not just he's the guy that got out and he's going to try to kill Tony and he's going to try to take over. It's not, it's not season 2 done all over again. It's a much more different dynamic, and that's another aspect of the season that I really liked in terms of Buscemi's character.
Yeah, but it kind of faints in that direction with Robert Loggia's character. That it's, oh, here's the new Richie Aprile is now. We have Feach Lamana. And I think we talked about this in an earlier episode, at least in passing, that how the show like lampshades that, has Tony like say like, I've been through this with Richie Aprile already. I'm
Yeah,
not going to let this go a whole season. Uh,
yeah,
and so they get rid of him in the 4th episode.
yeah, very
Really good one,
soon.
by the way.
But now, what did you think of the way in which they got rid of Feach? Because, like, okay, it's different. It's not really something we've seen before, but it's always kind of bugged me a little bit that they would take one of their, somebody who now knows a lot about their inner workings and how businesses run and what's going on with the family, and they're going to now have him placed in back into prison where he can spill the beans. They think, oh, he's an old timer, he would never do that, but it seemed, I can't really recall where they had done that before. It's a little odd.
I think they know that, yeah, like I said, they know that he is old school enough, and he's made it this far. He's not going to flip now. Uh, on top of that, I think there's some plausible sort of deniability ambiguity where maybe Feach isn't even entirely sure if he was set up uh, by Tony or if it was just bad luck. And on top of that, I don't know how much useful intel Feach really has on their organization. I mean, part of the reason why he got sent away is that he was not really like reporting directly to Tony or to
Well, yeah, he
you
was
know
he was
picking up like
breaking all the rules. He was
yeah.
not doing. He was basically trying to do business the way it was maybe 30 years ago, but not as during this era. I don't know. It kind of seemed like a strange move for them to make because, you know whenever, not just Richie, but like whenever they've needed someone to go, they just kill him. I mean, they've never really made, I think, this type of a move before with any of the characters. So it's always been one of those things.
Well,
It's kind of been like, I don't know if that really fits. So is there somebody you can think of that they also did that with?
no, not the same thing. I mean, actually, I think that's why I'm willing to go along with this, regardless of the like tactical viability of it, because it's a different novel way of resolving this type of conflict that we've seen multiple times, uh, and this deep into the series where things are starting to repeat themselves. I mean, that the way that Tim Daly seems to be a an actual reincarnation of Robert Patrick's role from a couple
Yes,
of seasons ago.
but I think much funnier though.
Sure, and Carmel is finally going through with one of her flirtations, making it
Right.
an actual physical relationship. But we've seen a lot of these beats before. We've seen Tony and or not Christopher and Polly like almost getting ready to kill each other a couple times now.
Yeah.
All this, but uh, so they're doing something, a new iteration on this and a new resolution for it. I'm all for that, even if it doesn't make perfect tactical sense. But I do think from a tactical or whatever mob politic perspective, I don't know that there are a lot of examples of them. Not when it comes to made guys,
Yeah.
that they're just offing uh, for being pains in the asses. They're for confirmed informants, or confirmed in quotes. Um, but remember all the Sturm and Drang around Johnny Sack wanting to kill Ralph.
Oh yeah.
Over a slight, and they wouldn't allow that to happen. Uh, you
No.
know, when there's Richie Aprile or Ralph end up disappearing, it's not like, I mean, obviously it's always a criminal conspiracy, so they're not publicly flaunting it, but you know there's still a public, or even to the other mob guys, there is a mob facing denial of what actually happened to those guys.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing that I've always read about Logia is, one of the he was planned to be a bigger part of the season, but that he, at that point in his life, was having trouble kind of remembering lines, and he was having a lot of difficulty, and so they kind of had to give him an earlier exit than was planned. So, I mean, I guess they just did the best they could with what they had.
Oh, I remember hearing a rumor that he was just difficult to work with because he like was more of an asshole, but and
I
Chase cut him loose because of that. But I never really believed it. It
Yeah,
just this feels very in keeping.
I had always heard
with
it
the
was
Sopranos ethos.
more just a memory thing, and just he was having a lot of trouble, kind of, which is hard to tell from his scenes because I think he's great. I mean, especially the scenes with him and Paulie where they're at war over the landscaping business. I think that, I mean, those are some great scenes. So I mean, I really couldn't tell. I mean, that he was having any kind of problems. I thought he was excellent on the show.
Yeah, I suppose those two things are not exclusive in any sense either.
No,
That it could have been having mental decline
and
and
that
making
turned
a
him into
more
an asshole.
credible at the
Yeah.
same time. But at the same time, I don't just not slandering the guy for no reason. I don't I think this feels very in keeping with how the Sopranos does business, especially this late in the game, where you know Chase is very intent on subverting traditional TV structure and expectations, um, and that this really fits with that. It like I said, it sets up Buscemi to actually be the new problem character, even though he is an ally, not. Uh,
Oh yeah.
I suppose Richie and Ralphie are nominally on Tony's team throughout those, but it's pretty clear from the jump of both of them that they are an enemy.
Yeah.
Um, whereas Buscemi is really not like angling to do Tony any harm.
No, no. I mean, he's got a lot of issues in terms of, how his life turned out and how Tony's turned out, and I think that kind of gnaws away at him, and that in some ways drives him to make some of the decisions that he makes later on in the season. But yeah, he's definitely not an enemy of Tony, and I think that's what makes ultimately what happens to him even more tragic, and in some ways fitting that he ends up getting done in by Tony.
Yeah, Tony didn't get to kill Richie and didn't get to kill Ralphie for so long when he really wanted to, and ended up doing it when he kind of
Yeah,
didn't want to anymore. It didn't
s-
mean to
spur of the
until the
moment.
last
Yeah,
minute. And then this is the one where he has to actually do it. But well, you mentioned that there's conflict between them because of their history, and I think that's all coming from Tony Soprano's end. That uh, Blundetto seems genuinely like he's not as resentful of Tony. I mean, he's a bit resentful of Tony's success, especially in like the birthday party episode, and
yeah,
uh, when he's sort of confronted directly with his family situation versus Tony's, like that gets under his skin a little bit. But he never, they say, he's never really working to undermine him. Yeah, he cracks a couple jokes behind his back, but he's not nearly as resentful of him as Christopher is. Who's Tony's number two guy, really. Um,
yeah. But like you said, I mean,
Mel
it's
Silvio is the number two, I suppose.
right, but it's really laid out in that birthday party episode. That's where
Hmm.
you, I think, to me, that's where you really see that it does kind of slap Tony B in the face, and you see he's pretty pissed off a lot during that episode. And then, that's basically where he first agrees to carry out the hit on the on one of the well, Joey Peeps, one of Johnny's guys. And
Hmm.
that's where he really kind of puts himself into that war that's going on between Johnny and Little Carmine. And that's what really makes life hard for the Tony that we know. But yeah, I just feel like that episode is where it definitely hits you right in the face that he's seeing the life that Tony has had while he's been on the inside. And he sees the healthy relationships, that at least the healthy relationships that he perceives Tony has with his kids. I mean, we kind of know a little better from seeing years and years of
Yeah,
Tony interacting with his kids. But it seems like that's really what sets Tony B off, and kind of where he's like, well, it's time for me to step up. And his idea of stepping up is kind of getting in the middle of that New York war.
yeah, and maybe there is a little bit of like uh, thumbing his nose at Tony's instruction not to get involved because he's resentful of them. But it's not really. I mean, compared to how people usually act out on The Sopranos when they're feeling,
Oh yeah,
uh, you know, resentful of somebody, it's pretty low key, and I think not the over or it's not just out of spite.
no,
It is out of feeling how far left behind he got, but in those however 17 years or whatever it was.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
they also established that he's got a very close relationship with the Joe Santos character, Angelo.
right.
They were very close inside, so that also I think kind of sways him in his decision, is kind of out of loyalty to Angelo.
Certainly. I mean that whole episode's really good. I love that one.
Oh yeah,
Very very light on the mob stuff until
yeah.
that he does that hit at the end. But just a great overall episode. There's a lot of different interpersonal dynamics working there, but it also is sort of just back to talking about now that the show's been on long enough, and it's sort of its pessimistic view of humans is such that there's not a lot of different ways that people can react uh, to the conflicts in this world, because they're not going to react well to any of them.
No,
Nobody's going to rise above anything unless
oh
they're
no,
Dr. Melfi. Um, and so we have seen versions of so much of this stuff before, like and that episode, the stuff with Buscemi, building up frustration with how Carmel is treating him as a servant. Uh, that is something that we saw back in the very first season, like one of the first couple episodes with Charmaine Bucco,
oh
when they
yeah.
had the Buccos cater for them at an event at their house, and Carmela, lorded over her in a way that she resented. Um,
Hmm.
and then I guess the overall structure of the season too is like, you know, I guess it's sort of a fake out, like we said, of Feach Lamont is going to be the new Richie Aprile, it's going to be a retrial of season 2, and then that gets resolved early, and then it's like, oh no, actually, Steve Buscemi is going to be the new Jackie Jr., and it's sort of a retread of the season 3 basic conflict that Tony eventually has to
Right.
kill somebody he cares about.
It's like you said. I mean, there's only so many different directions they can go, so it's more the, not really, no pun intended, the execution of it, and how,
Right.
how, what other little flourishes can they add to it. And so I personally, I think that Tony having to doing Tony B, it it means a lot more because they do such a great job establishing their history, even though we didn't see their history because this is the first season we're seeing Tony B. But I don't know. I just really bought that there was a real bond between them, and so it's obviously a pretty tough scene, even though it's really well done when Tony has to finally do him in and kind of save him from getting tortured from Phil.
Yeah, but also sort of save his own
Yeah,
bacon and
that
his own
too.
standing with the rest of his guys. But yeah, we'll get to that finale in a little bit. Let's for now, let's go back to our overarching question here: is who is the worst person in the world in this season?
Oh well, I gotta believe we're gonna be on the same wavelength here because it's so
I don't know.
easily. It's got to be Johnny. I mean, how is it not Johnny for this season? I mean, he just
Oh no,
turns in.
because what
He
a
turns into such a villain this season. I mean,
but
he
he's
is
so
just.
good.
Oh, he's so good at it. Yeah, I love watching
Yeah,
him. I mean, there's that scene. I think it's the third episode where they're having the meeting, and he's kind of talking about little Carmine, and he's talking about how I organized his fucking bachelor party,
oh
lesbian
yeah,
shows, whores, fucking disgusting. I mean, I don't know, just a lot of the actions that he doesn't do them himself because he's trying to be the boss, but I just feel like he goes full on hardcore mob villain this season.
yeah. But for all that, I think within the mob context, his reactions are all pretty justified and almost measured. I mean, I don't know. Like he still, even when he is on the warpath the most, he's never as like hateful or sadistic as a lot of these guys can be a lot of the time. Um, you know, I think Feach is worse than Johnny in this season.
Oh,
I
really?
think maybe Phil is worse. Like Phil
Yeah, but Phil,
is,
you don't really get a lot of Phil until maybe the last 5 episodes. I mean, he's kind of just a
yeah,
background guy most of the way.
Yeah, but then he's like threatening, Christopher and people that we are invested in,
Oh
and
yeah,
is
and Chris's mom too.
uh, yeah, his mother, which is crossing a
Yeah,
line. And on top of that, though, there's also the first time we really get any time with him is when he's trying to stiff Tony on the money, which is just sort of like petty for
yeah.
uh, you know. And in some ways, that's worse. Like everybody on this show is so murderous and violent that it stands out more when it's like, oh, that fucking chiseler is trying to,
Oh yeah, that yeah. I mean,
you know,
all these guys are
stiff
just
Tony on the bill.
yeah. These guys are all just like you said, just murderers and the worst of the worst. So it's almost like when it's the petty things that stick out more. Like
Yeah,
Phil's whole deal with the car seat with
exactly.
Angie. It's like that's nowhere near the worst thing that we've seen Phil do, but it just stands out because it's just so petty, like you said.
It's annoying.
Oh, of course.
I
Yeah.
think
I mean, it's like
it,
it's needless.
yeah. As I said that loud, I started realizing I started to disagree with myself. But actually, everybody on this show is also petty little chiselers.
Oh, they're
Like
all that way. Yeah.
Christopher sticking the matchbook in the
Oh,
scale at the the seafood
yeah.
place. Like everybody does that, is just cutting every angle they can. But you're right; it's the pettiness of that, and just the
Yeah.
childishness
Oh,
of
yeah.
the way he's
All of
acting out
that
there.
all that stuff, all I mean, the murders, I mean, that all looks cool visually, but it's the petty stuff that
Mhm.
almost stands out more. It's like, and in a way, that's kind of what does Feach in is just it's the fact that he couldn't appreciate or fake laugh at Tony's humor is pretty much where Tony decides, okay, this guy's not on board. He's not humoring me with a lot of fake laughter like the rest of my guys. It's time for him to go.
Yeah, I think that Sopranos has always had this like as something I like to play around with, but it's just really honed it to such a fine point now. Is just the little things that end up having life and death consequences in this world. Like you
Oh
said,
yeah.
not laughing at that joke. Um, oh god damn it! There, I had another example on the tip of my tongue, and now I've lost it.
Well,
Um,
or you
I
could go
mean,
back
going.
earlier to Ralph's joke. I mean, like
Oh yeah,
that just completely exploded into
yeah.
way bigger than anybody would have thought at the time. I mean, when you first says it, you're just like, oh, Ralph just said something obnoxious, and it ends up fueling them for about half a season, basically.
Oh, my example was going to be Jack Masserone sort of dooms himself by
Ah,
asking Tony if he lost weight.
yep, yep.
And in the earlier seasons, I feel like in the first season when Tony and Junior are finally going to war, and he says to Carmela that cunnilingus and psychiatry brought us to this, and like back
Yeah.
then, I feel like they I feel like they had to underline that sort of like how it's these sort of smaller issues that shouldn't be a problem, like interpersonal things that are blowing up into this big bloody mob violence. But now it can just sort of occur in this very natural way without having to really hang the lampshade on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, and then it's like, look at the petty actions of civilians towards the Sopranos. I mean, it's not. Maybe this isn't petty if you're an actual waiter, but that scene in the first episode where Chris and Paulie are at odds over the bill at the seafood place, and the poor waiter comes out to complain and say, hey, I work hard. You guys are stiffing me here, and I always think it's
probably his only table that night.
probably, yeah, and it's what like an $1,100 bill, and Johnny's gonna take home some left some. I don't even think they were leftovers. I think it was just a brand new order for Ginny. So and then Paulie's sending over the champagne to the
Cristal
lady.
to to
Yes,
the ladies.
but I love how in this world it's obviously Chris and Paulie have are always at odds, but they're kind of able to bond over the murder of a waiter. It's like it's we can put this behind us, and it's just funny that's how things kind of get resolved in their world is they are party together to a homicide of a just a blue collar waiter.
Yeah, now they're bonded again. It's
Yes.
it's definitely the sort of collateral damage to civilians is getting ramped up in this episode. It's getting like closer to the center of the frame that between the waiter and Sal Vitro, the landscaper,
Oh yeah.
which is and Angie Bob I guess, and that who gets stuck with the car bill because Phil's being a child,
Hmm.
and Tony's not going to help her out of it. Uh, but I mean, the landscaper thing is really also a great example of just everybody being a chiseler, where
Oh
Paulie,
right.
steps in out of magnanimously to help him out, and then winds up taking half of the meager amount of money that Tony, ordered Feach to pay him for his arm,
Yeah.
and then he also gets stuck, uh, you know, doing Tony's lawn for free, and Johnny's just
Oh,
incredible football field of a yard for
that's
free.
one of the great gags over the rest of the series are just the little tiny moments where Sal Vitro pops up and you know that it's not the work that he wants to be doing, and just
Yeah.
they don't really linger on it, but it does kind of pop up here and there over the course of the series. Yeah, it's that whole landscaping subplot. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I loved from Logia, and was kind of looking forward to having more of it, but that's the way he just couldn't humor Tony.
Well, going back to the question about who's the worst, actually, this is my pick for this season, and it's the first time when I think he's been in contention, but I think he wins outright this year. Is Tony himself? Uh,
Really? Ah,
yeah, that cold cuts episode is rough, man.
yeah, yeah, that is pretty rough, and I don't know. I guess I guess it's just because I'm so used to rooting for Tony. So even at this point of the series, even when he's a gigantic asshole and he's doing things that I don't necessarily like, I can still kind of accept them. It's later on in the series where I feel like I really start to turn on Tony and sort of say, oh man, this guy is just such a piece of shit. But it's not quite it hasn't quite happened to me yet in season 5. So that's but it's a fair choice. I'll admit it is. He does do a lot of shitty things in this season.
We just let see things in every season, but I think now that Ralph is gone, and there's no Richie, there's no Ralph, and like yeah, you're still rooting for him against Phil, but Phil is not as I don't know. Uh, Over the top odious as those guys, and
Yeah,
maybe not as like just prominent. Like he doesn't show up as much. So, and that as I said, that Colquitt episode where he baits Janice into sort
yeah.
of ruins her progress in anger management in such a horrifically just indefensibly sadistic way. Uh,
Which he takes so
yeah,
much joy in.
yeah, exactly. And then the other. So if we're highlighting an episode to talk about a piece, the one I want to talk about is one of my very favorite episodes of the series. Is Irregular Around the Margins, which is the one where he
Okay.
almost has the affair with Adriana,
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and that's a pretty shitty thing. There, like he doesn't, and I actually love the way that they do that, where they're actually innocent when the rumor mill gets going,
yes.
except only technically.
Well,
Like,
yeah, only because they crashed too soon. I think is probably the only reason they're
yeah.
innocent. But yeah, it was definitely headed in that direction.
So it's just such great stuff for Gandolfini, especially, who's so good at playing Tony's sort of contradictions and his self pity and everything. Is that for the second half of that episode, he's sort of righteously indignant, but also lying through his teeth about
Yeah,
everything. uh,
yeah. I mean,
uh,
they, yeah. I mean, they basically did everything except the deed, yet he's still indignant about the whole thing. Yeah, that is a really a terrific episode. uh, love that. I love the resolution of finding the doctor and and getting him
yeah,
to explain how someone's neck would be this way and how this person would be in this crash, and I and how I guess, well, that's got to be good enough for Christopher. It's like he can either accept that or he's dead. It's one or the other.
there's so much good stuff in there, and a lot of good like little funny bits in this episode, which is very intense for the most part. But you know the thing where the doctor asks Buscemi, like, "Are you a doctor?" Like,
Yeah.
pre-board certified massage therapist. It's just a great line.
Well, and
It's
I love how it's like they have the whole game of telephone with
oh yeah,
everybody connected to them, and how the story goes from this to that to the other, and oh, that's they haven't I hadn't really seen them do anything like that before on this show, and that's pretty damn funny stuff.
yeah. I mean, I suppose it's a little reminiscent of the Junior
Hmm.
giving oral sex to his girlfriend back in
Yeah,
season
that's
one,
true.
but it's like I said, it's a little they're able to be more playful about it, more succinct. It's everything's just you know the machine is so finely oiled at this point, and also I guess the cast is built out. We can see it bounce around this whole community of all these characters we know, and they're all
Yeah.
being little gossipy schoolgirls, but also we can see it coming from all of them.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's yeah, that whole sequence, it almost kind of reminds me of like something you'd see on The Simpsons. It's just because
Yeah,
now this show has been on long enough at this point, season 5, where even the minor characters, we have a real good beat on them. And so that's another reason why this season is so great, is because now it's like it's just operating, all cylinders are going. They everything's really been established, and so you get a sequence like that where this rumor is kind of being blown out of proportion and going from this person to that person, and it's just the fact that we have such a good handle on all these characters at this point, that that's what makes those sequences work so well.
yeah. Uh, Man, it's great. The other great thing about this episode, like trading from the comedy to the dramatic side of it, is that it's sort of the quintessential example of what the show could do and how unpredictable it could be from week to week. Because if you had told me coming off of episode 4, like what's going to happen next week, and somebody said, "Oh, I saw an early screener," and what happens is Tony and Adriana start flirting, and they're about to have an affair. But then they get into a car wreck, and Christopher comes home and finds out about everybody finds out about it. So everybody's snickering about it on his back, and Christopher pulls a gun on Tony, and they take him out and are about to put a gun to his head, and are about to shoot him. But then they kind of resolve it, and nothing much comes of it after that. I'd be like, oh bullshit, like that doesn't sound believable in the slightest. Like this is somebody on the internet lying to me.
Yeah.
But
When you put it that way, that you're right. It doesn't just out of the blue to have an episode like that where there's really no setup beforehand is pretty wild.
but in the course of like 15 or 20 minutes, how
Yeah.
believably they build up that, oh yeah, Adriana and Tony are attracted to each other now, like,
Hmm.
and and how close they are to blowing up both of their lives
Yeah.
over this little attraction that builds up. Like it's incredible to me how believable uh, the writers and the performers there made that, um, and then how it can be sort of resolved. And then after this episode, if you told me that, like, okay, how is this going to play out going forward? I mean, I would have said, okay, this is defined now. Tony and Christopher's like conflict will eventually like come of this. Christopher has turned against Tony permanently now, and things will come to a head based on how this is the breaking point of their relationship, and it's not.
No.
It's so crazy that and I never would have guessed like, oh, it'll just kind of sort of sit dormant for the rest of the season, and pretty much the season after that, and then 2 seasons from now, Christopher will make a horror movie about that
Yeah.
involves a mob boss cheating with his underlings
Yeah,
spouse.
it's that's
Uh,
that he lets it simmer for quite a while. That is definitely the case. And that's part of the genius of the show is, oh, we're not gonna get back to this next week. We're gonna get back to it in two
yeah.
years, and it'll be even more satisfying that way.
Well, and in a way that you never would guess is how it's
Yes.
going to pan out. And then, yeah, just the idea that you could spin this up so suddenly and have it be this explosive and this close to like destroying the entire, a huge part of the fabric of this show is the relationship between these couple characters, uh, and then have that sort of that you could turn that heat back down so quickly,
Oh, I know.
and like you could buy from another show that they would resolve that and it'd be kind of bullshit, but they could just kind of put it, it'd be a thing that happened one week that never gets mentioned again, but actually
Right.
it does sort of affect the fabric of the entire show going forward,
Oh
just
yeah.
not at all in the way you would expect.
No, no,
That's
it takes, a long time for for Christopher to really project, his feelings about the whole thing. And I mean his whole relationship with Adriana, I mean, this season especially, it's man, it's so it's the scenes some of the scenes that those two have together in this season are just stellar. And I mean, I know we'll
yeah.
get to long-term parking at some point, but yeah, I just man, I can definitely see why, both Imperioli and Adriana won the Emmys this season.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we can jump ahead and talk about long term parking now. That
Yeah.
one, obviously, one of the best. I think I currently have it at the top of my list of best episodes of the show, and it's wild. Like it doesn't sound good to say that. Oh yeah, the best episodes this season are if Chris is, you know, punching Adriana and choking her on the couch in their apartment. That's how you know it's a good one. But
It's the
that's
truth.
the two best episodes of the season. Maybe like.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I always, whenever we do these, I'm always trying to find, kind of the under the radar episodes. But I,
Mm.
to me, it's like I got to go with what's on the radar, what's staring me right in the face. And yeah, long term parking is, oh my god, I mean, that's like probably the most haunting episode that they ever did, just in terms
Oh
of where there'll just be random moments in life where I'll just kind of suddenly think about things in that episode, and I'll just be like, "Oh my god, that was horrendous." I mean, it's like for all the violence that we've seen on the show, the fact that probably the most memorable demise we don't even really see is kind of shows you just how powerful that episode is.
yeah, we see the lead up to it is so
Everything, yeah. We see everything
just emotionally
except,
brutal.
yeah. And it's like that makes it even more impactful. But yeah, there's just so much good stuff in that episode. Like one of the other scenes that's always kind of stayed with me is, after, Adriana has told Christopher, what's going on, and she's been talking to the feds, and kind of is trying to pitch that they'll go escape together. There's that scene
Mhm.
where Christopher is at the gas station, and he's filling up, and he kind of looks over and he sees this other couple in a car next to him. And it's just the guy's kind of shabbily dressed, and he's got a bunch of kids
It's a
yelling
beat
and
up station
screaming.
wagon
Yeah, and it's like when
while Christopher's filling up his Hummer.
yes, and so it's like he's looking at that, and he's like, "Oh God, this is probably where I'm going to be ending up if I do run off with Adriana." And just kind of the way that transitions into the phone call from Tony to Adriana. It's so masterfully done.
Yeah, there is the scene that they actually, I guess, scripted and shot for this episode that they ended up using as a flashback in the next season because they didn't want
Yes,
to. But the scene where Christopher actually tells Tony,
yeah.
uh, it's actually a really good scene on its own. But I think they definitely made the right choice
Oh,
to
100%.
to jump forward there and do it sort of more from Adriana's perspective.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
and I think one of the reasons that it works so much better without that scene is that when when Adriana gets the call, we're still rooting for her to live, and so we're
yeah,
kind of a mind of, well, maybe what Tony, even though deep down we know what Tony's doing. I feel like if you've watched the show, but there's part of you that says, well, maybe she's going to be okay, and she might be able to get out of this. And so yeah, but the fact that they didn't include that scene is why we kind of have that belief, and it really works so much better by keeping that scene out of it.
Yeah, it happens quickly enough that you can have almost enough time to convince yourself, like, well, maybe,
Maybe.
and not wonder too much about, like, well, why is he making this call from a payphone then? If like, why
Yes.
this could be on a cell phone if it was above board. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
but
it's everything we know about these people. It's very easy for us to see that she's dead at that point. But we just
mm,
have, because we like her so much and we've spent so much time with her. There is that little bit of a just kind of rooting that maybe something's going to be able to save her. So, oh man, it's just, yeah, those scenes of her just driving with Sil. Oh my god, that's just, it's brutal. I mean, it's like, it's not in your face violence, but it's that mental violence that just packs
oh
even
yeah,
a
it's
bigger
so much more
wallop.
haunting than
Oh,
watching Ralphie get beat to death.
yeah, I mean, that's like, that's brutal, and you're like, oh my god, and that's fun, and it's like, oh, they're fighting in the kitchen, and that's great on its own level, and I
Yeah,
love that
there's
scene.
bug spray and frying pans
Oh
and
yeah,
all this shit.
yeah. So I mean, it's just to the show's credit that they're able to do it either way. Fantastic. Whether they want to be right in your face with it, or whether they really want to play around with it, and really kind of creep you out with the impending death that is approaching. Either way, the show is going to be the best at it. But oh yeah, just kind of even now,
Well,
just
that
thinking
sort
of
of ties
her.
back to what I was saying about Irregular Around the Margins too, and how that's such an incredible example of the weird knuckleballs the show could throw that
Yeah,
no other show could. But also what long term parking shows that, oh, like, shit, they still have a fastball too. Like this is straight down the middle, sort of exactly what you might have expected to happen uh, uh, when Adriana first got sort of caught by the feds. Like,
yeah.
well, how's that going to play out? And it's more or less this. And man, it is still such a gut punch and
Oh yeah.
so like powerful throughout when it happens. Um, and you're almost hoping that the show is gonna throw a curveball.
Oh, I
But
know, I know. It's again, it's a beloved character. I mean, she's obviously, there are shitty things that she had done over the course of the series, not to the extent of the mobster characters, but I mean, yeah, it's like, who didn't like her? And it's like, I think everybody knew as soon, yeah, like you mentioned, as soon as she started talking to the feds, you knew, oh, the way this show is, it's not going to end well. But man, you just have that little bit of hope that she can somehow make it out. And oh man, it's just really, really tough stuff to watch.
yeah, man, that's a tough one, a tough act to follow up. But you know what? It's not even the season finale.
No.
And the season finale, called All Due Respect, also one of the best episodes the show ever did, I would say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, this it like I think, I've talked to you about before. I think it's the best 1-2 punch that the show had, in terms of, just if you had to just watch 2 episodes and you're gonna get the whole Sopranos experience in 2 episodes. It is these last two. I mean, there's just so much great scenes. Man, I mean, I not to skip to the end of the episode, but man, I just love that sequence when the feds come in, and they, you kind of see them approaching out of the corner of the screen, and you see the look on Tony's face as soon as he spots them, and he takes off, and just that whole
Mhm.
kind of him, trying to escape and kind of going through the snow. Um, it's that's just such a fantastic way to end that season. It's so good, and all the stuff where Phil is just being a complete monster. I mean, he was, like I said, he was kind of a sideline character for most of the season, but yeah, when he's just kind of on the warpath and he's just looking to kill anybody that's even remotely close to Tony, it's like, that's where, man, Frank Vincent is just really shining in those scenes.
I love the moment there you said when the feds first show up and you see them sort of creeping up in the snow, and for a second you think that, oh, this is Johnny laid a trap for Tony and their guys
Yeah,
coming to kill him. Before you realize it's the FBI.
yeah.
Um,
I love that, the whole season is not the whole season, but a big aspect of the season is the war between Johnny and little Carmine, and who's going to get control, and then this person kills this person, and it just goes on and back and forth, and then he finally gets everything that he wanted, and then he gets busted. So I think that's just
Yeah.
kind of the perfect end to his reign as the head of the New York family.
Yeah. Also, I sort of like it's almost another way to subvert expectations there that the New York mob war goes back and forth between Johnny and Little Carmine until finally Little Carmine just taps out. You know,
Oh yeah,
Johnny doesn't whack
which
him like,
no, well
uh,
to me,
but he just
as
quits.
well, and that's the smartest thing he could have done. I mean, because
Yeah.
he just didn't have he never would have had the stomach to do what's needed to be done in that role. And it's like we've it's already been pretty much established when we first met little Carmine at the end of season 4 that he's a little bit dim, and he
Mhm.
just does not have that imposing presence. I mean, he kind of seems like a perfectly decent guy to hang out with. If I'm not saying necessarily a nice person, but at least out of these guys, he seems like someone that you could kind of hang out with and not feel like you were going to be murdered at any second.
Yeah.
And so, him tapping out is to me is the smartest move that he could have made.
Yeah, he doesn't seem as prone to just the outbursts of random violence.
No,
You're right. He's one of the dumbest characters around, but he's just smart enough to know that he can't actually do this without Angelo. Like
yeah,
once they take out that his sort of second man character, he's like that guy was sort of my brains.
he
So
was
I
he
definitely can't see
was
this through on my own.
No, no, and then once you mess with his boat, I mean, I think that was another another
Broke his
final
spirit.
straw for him, where he just is like, yeah, let me just stick to producing porno and whatever the hell else he was doing at the time when his father died.
Actually, there was something else I wanted to ask you about long term parking,
Yes.
which is so. Do you think one of the ways that I guess like the irregular around the margins episode continues forward here is you think if it weren't for that episode with her and Tony almost having the affair and not getting out, do you think Christopher goes with her instead? Did that end up? Did a regular on the
Ooh.
margins episode end up costing Adriana her life?
You know what? Yeah, that's I've never really thought about that, but I think so. I think that might have been other than him seeing the shabby guy at the gas station. I think basically those two thoughts in his head are probably what did prevent him from going off with her. So yeah, I think you are right
Yeah.
about that. Definitely.
If you buy that it was a close decision for Christopher at all, then I think
Yes.
that has to have been the tipping point or the a determinative factor. However, you
Yeah.
could make the case that it wasn't actually that close of a decision. That it just he was sort of dragging his feet because it was a painful one, but
Yeah. I
he
mean,
was
the way he
if it hadn't
plays
been
it.
that mullet, it would have been another mullet. So
Yeah, the way
a
that
little
he
farther down the road.
plays it makes it seem like it's an awfully close decision.
Right.
They almost kind of portray it as if he hadn't seen the shabby guy in the gas station, he probably would have gone off
Mhm.
with her. But yeah, I think definitely what happens between Adriana and Tony is very prevalent in his decision making at that point.
Sort of another example of how whenever Tony makes a mistake, it's somebody else always
Oh,
pays the
somebody,
price
yes,
for it, and
always, always,
he kind of
yes.
gets away.
Now, to just to go back one episode before the great final two of the season. Now, like, what are your thoughts on Test Stream?
It's some really like high quality dream filmmaking that anybody who
Yeah,
wants to do dream sequences should like study. As an episode, it's a little too highly concentrated for me. That it goes
Ye-
on for too long.
yes, I
We
I
talked
I
about this in an earlier season. My ideal, and again, another way that we're sort of repeating ourselves is this is sort of a repeat of Funhouse, where
yes,
Tony knows that there's somebody close to him who's become a liability, and he kind of has to take them out for the greater good of the mob family. Uh, and he processes that through these elaborate dream sequences. So we've seen that before. and the test dream, to its credit, I think, does things differently enough that it didn't feel like a direct retread of that. However, I think Funhouse is more of my ideal here, where the back and forth between the dream sequence and the real world is uh, quicker paced. And
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of I think Funhouse did the best job of balancing dreams with the show's reality. I felt like it was too much with the test stream. It just kind of goes on, and it kind of it really loses me at a certain point. Um, so yeah, it's
around when Annette Bedding shows up, I think is
yeah,
where it
yeah,
loses me.
and then John Hurd as Vic shows up, and you know
Mhm.
what's actually interesting about that scene in the restaurant is they actually shot because I've seen photos. I've never seen the actual footage, but I've seen photos where okay, so at a certain point, you know, Finn is there and he gets switched out with AJ, and Meadow is
Mhm.
also there. And at a certain point, she gets switched out with Tracy from University, and there's you know
Oh,
pictures of
really?
her. And but I guess at some point somebody said, "Oh, this is even more wild than we can stomach," so they cut her out of it, which is weird. I mean, out of all the stuff that's going on in that episode, they cut her out of it. But it just goes on too long, and you know, it's all basically I
I
get the
actually
reason why they do it. I mean, it's important because it's basically what convinces Tony to get back with Carmela and for him to realize that hey, you know, I can't be living this way, you know, living out of the plaza and you know, I've got to get back to my home and so I get the purpose of the dream and how it functions on that level, but it's just too much.
just to start the Tracy thing. Like, I think that's actually a really good decision to cut her out of there, because I feel like bringing her back up there, it's almost a sop to us as the viewers to like assure us that, oh, this horrific piece of violence that we all witnessed, that is still like one of the, you know, most traumatic things on the series, like, uh that's still like Tony's still carrying that with him, and he feels the guilt for, of that. So it's almost more okay, and it's almost reassuring us that that wasn't all for nothing, or it wasn't like
Okay.
completely for nothing. But really, the thing and the damning thing about Tony is that I think he has like completely forgotten about her at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
That
I
he's not really haunted by that.
no. Well, no. I mean, that's yeah. The show, like we like to think that these things linger and that he, you know, deep down that
Mhm.
he's a good guy and that you know, oh, you know, he would really care about her. And yeah, I mean, for a few episodes in season three, I think he did. But by this point, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. He really he could give a shit. So yeah, I guess on that level, I can see why they would have removed her from that scene. I just always felt like for all the oddball stuff that's going on there, I always thought it was weird that they decided to clip her out of that episode. So just strange to me anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about that strikes me as, continuing to revisit that expressly seems like assuring the viewer that no, 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 that was an important thing. That it was okay that we subjected you to it, because
Yeah,
it actually is key psychologically to everything that's happening now.
yeah,
Um, and actually, the keys are much more about his, uh, less about, this horrible violence that he sees inflicted on women, and allows to happen,
yeah.
uh, and more about his insecurities about being, varsity athlete material.
Yes. So do you have one in this season that you would kind of consider a dud that just does not work for you at all?
You know, one of my least favorite one for a long time is the In Camelot episode,
Mm.
but upon revisiting that, I there's some good stuff in there.
Oh yeah,
That is the one where
that's
he like chases down Phil and crashes his car.
yes.
Um, and the Tony B stuff in there is good. It's got some like cringe elements that Sopranos doesn't really hit that often. So it's one that's not that fun to rewatch.
Well, see,
Um,
I liked it because I thought it was interesting to see what happens to the mob girlfriends. What happens to the Gumars that we just kind of randomly see on the show. And so, through that character, his dad's old mistress, we kind of see, what becomes of the women that these guys do not marry. And so I thought it was interesting on that level. And yeah, it's definitely cringy when she's, doing her Marilyn Monroe, happy birthday impression to Tony, but I think that's
Mhm.
supposed to be cringy. I mean, we're supposed to
Yeah.
be like, oh, that's disturbing right there. But I don't know. I liked that they kind of explored what becomes of these women who are not, I would say, unlucky, but some would say lucky enough to marry these precious mobsters.
Well, there's just a lot of stuff in there that's done really well. I like, especially, I love sort of Junior's account of
Oh
uh,
yeah.
of her when she was young and how he was in love with her but never told her and he suffered in silence. And then Tony relates that to her and she's like, "Yeah, he basically stalked me." And just the whole way that like Tony goes through all this process of you know idolizing his father and then sort of putting this woman on a pedestal of like that she was this glamorous figure, and then how she becomes that mythology becomes tarnished in his eyes and he starts to realize how terrible like things were for his mother throughout it. And then at the end he sort of builds back up the glamour around her uh, for for the sake of everybody else and to like maintain the image of his father for everybody else even though it's not really there for him anymore. That stuff is all like really well rendered here and really kind of important. I think it adds something to the overall Sopranos tapestry. I'm really glad it's there. Like I said, it's just not my favorite one to actually sit down and watch.
Yeah, and I would also add that, even if this episode only contained the scene where Tim Daly tries to pawn his Emmy, that would be enough for me to love
Yeah.
it, because I that is, I mean, I feel like, because at this point, the show hadn't actually won a series Emmy, so I feel like that was also a great kind of, kind of a great screw off to the Emmy people, by that whole sequence. And the, if this was an Oscar, maybe we could do something. And you got anything else? And just the way he has to grab the Emmy and still leave the pawn shop
Mhm.
and get buzzed out. It's like such a great performance from Tim Daly, that whole episode.
Yeah, it's the Hollywood satire stuff is always like touchy for me, and I think a lot of shows it's a lot easier to do it badly than it is to do it well. And even a lot of shows sort of like I think pretend that they are like doing it well by just uh, making some jokes at the expense of
Yeah.
writers or actors or whoever, but it's still kind of like yeah, but you're still centering like writers and actors as like some of the most important people in this world and like worthy of this focus, and it's sort of inherently aggrandizing and it's almost unavoidable. But Sopranos, I think it just has such a low opinion of everybody of all walks of life that it
Well,
just fits
yes,
right in
it
to the
evens
rest
out.
of
Yeah, it's
yeah.
they take their shots everywhere. But that whole arc of Tim Daly, at least, I mean, we see him later on in later seasons, but in this one in
Yeah.
particular, him having to sign his car away. Meanwhile, Christopher's kind of rooting him on to go to rehab. And there's
that's
those there's no
that scene
chemical
is
solution
ridiculous.
to a spiritual problem, as he's
Yeah.
signing, as JT Dolan is signing over his
Yeah.
car to Christopher. It's And then it's like, oh, I love this car.
Meanwhile, the vig is still running at 2 points a week.
Exactly. Oh yeah, and and just the way when he says, "I love this car," and Christopher, "Oh, you'll get another car."
Yeah.
It's just, oh man. I mean, it is basically a rip off of the stuff with Robert Patrick, but I don't care because it's just done so well.
Yeah, I don't mind that it is very much a retread. It's the same
Yeah.
card game that they that busted up
Yes.
in, but it's Christopher sort of it's cementing him as sort of Tony's heir because it's Christopher has taken on Tony's role. where it's his deadbeat
Yes.
friend that he is now just going to bleed dry because he got in over his head at that particular poker game. But it's also got that Hollywood stuff layered on top of it, which again, not my favorite stuff, but it gives it a different flavor than the Robert Patrick stuff. Actually, my favorite bit of Tim Daly of this entire series, I think, is they we know that we've heard that he is on deadline for he's got to submit to Dick Wolf to try
Yeah.
and get this gig to pay off his debts, and we cut to him sitting on his couch in front of his laptop, and he's like looking at the laptop with his hand on his chin, like looking thoughtfully off, and then he goes down to it and makes like a click or two, and it cuts. Then we see his laptop screen, and it's just like this like Candy Crush type game that
Yeah.
that he was thinking about the move what to do, and it's like in like 6 seconds that is such a better portrait of like I think
Yeah. I
sort of
mean,
self-effacing portrait of a writer than a lot of shows managed in half an hour.
oh yeah. I mean, they nailed it with getting Tim Daly to do that part because he kind of has that look too of kind of the cocky Hollywood writer, and so to kind of see him knock down a few pegs is I just think they really struck gold getting him to do that part, and yeah, it's even a lot funnier as he shows up more with all the Cleaver stuff, and that's where they really lean into a lot of the Hollywood. In fact, where they actually end up going to Hollywood, but I feel like at this point they hadn't really done a lot of the Hollywood jokes and kind of the inside stuff. A little bit. They certainly did it with D Girl with the when John Favreau was on. But
Sure.
at this point, I feel like it was still relatively new, and even though they were really taking a lot from the season two stuff with Robert Patrick, I think the extra layer of Hollywood stuff to it kind of made it a little bit fresh.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that there's one other thing that bothered people about this season, as I recall. That there's the test stream obviously is divisive,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think we're more or less on the same page there. That it's pretty well done. Like some of that, but it's just a little too long in concentration there. Like the great thing about Sopranos, I think, is how it handles all this psychological stuff in a way. It ties it to the mob world where the the whims of this guy's subconscious and his sort of petty resentments carry such life and death consequences for the Adrianas and the Richie Apriles and the Salvitros of the world. And it gets away from that for a little too long of a stretch before tying back to it. It's also hard. I think Chase was really savvy about it's hard to stay mad at the test stream when it's followed up by that 1-2 punch of long-term working in all
Yes.
due respect. That is everything you could want for The Sopranos.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but there's
You
one other
know,
thing that I recall being a source of complaints, which is the sort of how Buscemi's fall from the straight life is precipitated by uh, just a bag of money getting thrown out of the car window at his feet. Um, and did that ever strike you as too
I never
convenient, too
had.
whatever? Like,
I never really had a problem with that. I mean, it's 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 that it's the world that the show takes place in, where there's seemingly crimes going on virtually everywhere at any particular time. It could happen, and maybe you do pull a blendetto and you luck into a bag of money and drugs, and unfortunately you have to throw away the drugs. But yeah, that never really bugged me at all. It's yeah, it's a little bit out of the ordinary, and but no, I had no issues with that particular scene at all.
well, I, I mean, I didn't love that particular scene, maybe, but I don't. I kind of like the overall conceit, which is that you kind of expect that what's going to knock Tony B off the straight and narrow path is like a bad day. It's almost like it's said to be more of like the killing joke or something, where he doesn't have the wherewithal to stick with it when it gets hard, and so he, you know, like I think early in that episode he gets the truck robbed, and you can see him like out from under him, and he
Yeah.
gets his leg hurt, and then his boss blames him. It's like, if he got fired from that, and like, oh, he falls off that way. But what does him in is a stroke of good luck, and how he can't. These
Yeah.
guys, as much as the mobsters cannot handle like setbacks and minor frustrations, uh, they also like are not equipped to handle a stroke of good luck when they get there.
No.
Success. They're not equipped to handle success
No.
either, um,
Right. Well, yeah.
and that's what knocks
Yeah.
them off.
Well, yeah. Money is the worst thing for these people, because that's only going to get them in trouble, because then they want more of it, and for them, getting more of it isn't really working hard, 50 hours a week. It's, oh, who can Tony get me to kill, and I can make some money that way, or who can I go to my good friend Angelo, and who does he need killed, and so I can keep up this luck streak. Only now it turns into having to kill people for money. So yeah, it's like anytime these guys come into money, it's usually to their detriment.
All right. Any final thoughts before we move on to season 6?
Just again, just one last reflection on what I think is the best season. Like I said, I have some quibbles with the test stream. I think it goes on a little too long, but that's like seriously my only complaint at all with this season. I think it's a great episode after the other. So just one that I'm always happy to go revisit, and especially that final 1-2 punch of long-term parking. In all due respect, it's like that's it doesn't get any better with this series.
Yeah. Even the ones we didn't talk about, I feel like that's what sets us apart, is that like the lesser episodes of this season are still like head and
Oh
shoulders
yeah,
above
yeah. I
a
mean,
middling episode from season 3 or season 1.
yeah, I mean, we touched on cold cuts a little bit, but I love that one. I mean, anytime they kind of go into a different setting, I always sort of love those episodes, and all the jokes that they're telling at Tony's expense are hysterical. So again, like that's not really a major episode in terms of for the overall arc of the season, but like you had mentioned, the great stuff with Tony and Janice there. And but yeah, it's like each one of the episodes this season is a winner to me. Even test stream, it goes on a little too long, but I just top to bottom, it's all great.
Yeah. My recollection of season 6, at least 6A, the first stretch, is that it's
Yeah,
not all great. So I think we'll have a little bit of a come down for that one, but
a
we'll
little
reconvene
bit.
for that in a few weeks.
Yes, I'll look forward to that, definitely.
All right. Thanks, man.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
right and wrong.